I'm Emily Zayden. I'm the director of the Craft in America Center in Los Angeles. Thanks so much for joining us today. We are incredibly excited to have this talk from artist Joan Takayama-Ogawa, who's joining us from Pasadena, California today. Her exhibition is currently on view at our center here in LA and also on our website. We have the virtual as well, which includes images, a 360 view of her exhibition, videos, more videos coming. The exhibition is on view in person through December 3rd. Don't miss it. These are objects you have to see in person to really appreciate their beauty and significance. I also want to mention that we have an additional event that we are co-planning with the Japanese American National Museum here in Los Angeles on November 17th in the evening. Please, if you're able and local, we would love to have you join us. Joan is going to be speaking with Renee Tajima Pena, and that should be an incredible event. And we also are working on a catalog for this exhibition that is forthcoming. So stay tuned for much, much more. So Joan, we adore you, and I want to give you as much time as possible to fill us in on this incredible body of work you've been creating. It's been an honor to host this first survey of your first 30 years. You inspire us all through the objects you make and your thoughtful observations of the horrors of our world and also the beauty that surrounds us. So thank you. I pass it over.
Thank you, and thank you, everyone. Good morning to some of you. Good afternoon to hopefully many of you. I will share my screen. I think it's really important to always say thank you, and a show like this is not put together easily. A big thank you to everyone at Craft in America, and we have a long list of people who have been involved in the installation of this work and also the planning of this work, as well as the Los Angeles County Department of Arts and Culture, Pasadena Art Alliance, the Takata family, the Kita family, and my 100-year-old Auntie Nobi. Thank you so much to all of the lenders who have participated and made this possible. And most of all, to my husband, Stephen Ogawa, for all the reasons he knows best. Uh-oh, I am not able to share though. How come? I mean, okay. I think the title of this presentation is Not My America, and this is actually the most recent work that I have done, which is called America's Schoolhouse Shooting Gallery 2022. I just completed it about a month ago. And what happened during the summer was I was watching live the Uvalde shooting while I was on summer vacation, and it was absolutely devastating and extremely frustrating to watch live these children and faculty being shot up like fish in a barrel. So what I did was I started researching school shootings, and this is a list of all over here on your left, and you can see how thick it is. It's almost 3/4 of an inch thick from Wikipedia, of about 3 to 4 shootings per page, over almost 500 shootings in America at schools. This shorter, or not as thick of a stack of shootings, is about for 8 deaths or more in our schools. So when I came up with this idea, I thought this was an interesting, uniquely American problem. Here we have a Black United States, and also we have over to your left in the center and over to your right, America being shot by AR-15s. These AR-15s I was able to get a hold of from chocolate candy molds on, excuse me, on Amazon. I received them within 24 hours, and I pressed the clay in them, and also I gold leaf them to indicate how much our gun manufacturers are making. So over the past 10 years, America's gun manufacturers have made $1 billion of sales of AR-15s to the public. That's to the public, not including all the AR-15s that are being sold underground. Approximately 500 school shootings, as I said, 30 school shootings with 8 or more deaths. And I can purchase upgrades to an AR-15 on Amazon and receive those upgrades within 24 hours. And I can also purchase online an AR-15 for as low as $395. The access of the AR-15 is absolutely ridiculous. It's devastating. And we're at the point where teachers are reluctant to teach. Students and parents are afraid to go to school. And we see right now a rise in homeschooling, which I find unacceptable. And so we are developing a national crisis. And here's a very good example on your left, Vicky Yamashite. And this is the actual spelling. This is not a typo error on my part, but Vicky Yamashite is a retired ceramic teacher, and she has experienced 2 school shooting threats at her school, and she quit. And I could tell by what a wonderful individual and dynamic individual she is, that for her to stop teaching is a great loss for her school. But but we all know that Vicky is not alone. But I want to take you, people often wonder how I got into ceramics, and I want to take you back to the 15th century of Japan. My family is from Tokoname in Aichi Prefecture, which is just south of Nagoya. Just to give you an idea, Tokyo would be up here, Kyoto's down here, Osaka's down here. But this is my town that my family comes from, and you can see that they use broken pots as retaining walls, and this is an example of some of the work that my family does in Japan. And we have been in Japan working in ceramics for since the 15th century. My grandfather came to Pasadena when he laid the big red car track, and he stayed and eventually established Meiji Laundry. We think about 1908, and it continued until 1941. And it closed during relocation camps. So here is Meiji Laundry, and here's my grandfather. And he was able to get 7 other families to join him in the ownership. At one point, we had about 200 to 300 employees. Now, how do you do that? You do that by creating cottage industries. So they had horse and carriage, and then later on, trucks and cars delivering laundry to people's homes, where the housewives were able to, and children were able to wash the laundry, hang it outside, and iron it, and then deliver it to the mansions on Orange Grove. Here are my mom, dad, and me in the late 1950s on Brixton Road, and here is my a piece that mom, dad, and me that I did when I was a student at Otis in 1989. My mom, just like every other Japanese American on the continental United States, was relocated, and this is a picture of her at Poston relocation camp. My father was drafted into the military, and he joined military intelligence during World War II and was paired with Navajo-speaking individuals, and also a Japanese-speaking person, because my father's Japanese was not great, but his English was perfect because he was born here. And so what happened is that the Japanese translator would read the Japanese. My dad would speak in English to the Navajo translator, who then wrote it in Navajo in code. And so you may have seen the film Code Talkers. They were part of that team. But my father could not find his father because my grandfather owned a business. He was picked up by the FBI, and they had no way of knowing where he was. My father was in the military. My uncle was in the military, both of them drafted. And so they couldn't find their father, and finally found him at Gila River Relocation Camp. And here's a illegal photo taken by my dad, who finally found his father, Shichitaro Takayama. My father, upon returning to the United States in 1948, so he stayed he was in the military for a long time, 1941 to 1948, because he was in military intelligence. And part of that, he never knew General MacArthur, but he was part of that General MacArthur group. And so he was not able to resume his or even start his architectural practice until after 1948. It is very opportune because we had the building of Los Angeles. And so this is one of his early projects. And as a young child, I had an adapted hard hat and would go on Saturdays and Sundays to look at some of his projects. And here's one that you might recognize if you're from Los Angeles. This is City Hall. This is a fountain and a mall that he worked on. We have the Superior, and it's right next to the Superior Courts. My mom worked at the Huntington Hospital for most of her life. And so therefore, during the pandemic, I made a Hope for a Cure cupcake dedicated to healthcare workers. A lot of people don't know, but the Takayamas and the Osakis broke the residential color barrier in Pasadena in the 91105 zip code. It's called the San Rafael area. It was not necessary. We were not welcomed at all because we moved in 1955. In 1961, the Saltman family broke the religious line in Pasadena. And how was this done? Mr. William Carr, a real estate broker, sold us our homes in Pasadena in the San Rafael neighborhood. And this will be very, very important. And later on, Mr. Carr will be given posthumously the Pasadena Humanitarian Award. Dr. Carl Erickson, my pediatrician, on my first day at San Rafael Elementary School here, I was not welcomed at all, but he came to school because he had a very big practice in Pasadena with, I think, 6 other pediatricians, and he carried me around the playground, and he carried me to all the carpools that were pulling up to San Rafael Elementary School, talked to people, and so I felt very special. Dr. Joseph Messler was our primary physician, and he was the only primary physician in Pasadena to treat Japanese Americans upon their release from relocation camps. Dr. Messler, his estate was given to the Huntington Hospital, and if you ever go to the emergency ward at the Huntington Hospital, you will see Dr. Messler's name on the building. This is our home that we lived in the San Rafael area. When I was very young, probably about 3 years old, these men with, well, they might have been women, but these people with white hoods and white robes were all over our front yard here, and they burned a cross in our front yard ice plant. This is now cacti, but it was very scary. And so my father, who was an architect, created certain defense mechanisms so that in case we ever had another racial incident and we were in danger again, he created a system where he had a series of fences. So he has a fence up here, he has a fence up here. And actually it's very hard to find our front door. So over here, you can see our front door is kind of hidden right over here. And then through the back door, which was my bedroom, these French doors open, we could vacate through the backyard. And here's the umbrella to give you an idea. You could vacate through the side yard here. And then this was all covered by plant material, actually. You'd have to hop over this potted plant, go up this hillside all the way up here through a bamboo forest. And then through the bamboo forest, there was a small exit that took us up to the street behind us. And we had an arrangement with our neighbors behind us to open their doors and hide us. This continued until 1991 when my father passed away. We saw no need for it really, and we never used it again. However, I think that informed much of what I think about even today about racial profiling. UCLA in 1973 to 1978, I was a geography and East Asian study major where I learned about greenhouse gases as early as 1973. I studied the threat of climate change. And then this is from my textbook, which I actually ripped out, and it explains plate tectonics, which are, of course, these jarring plates that cause our earthquakes. And I used to hang this upside down in my studio so that I could look at the plate tectonics. I also studied in Japan during my junior year, and I studied at International Christian University, which was the University of California campus. Here are some of my classmates during that time period, and here's one of my classmates who attended the opening. This, according to everyone who knows me, says it was a watershed, life-changing, cross-cultural experience for me. I spoke no Japanese. I didn't act like a Japanese woman, and it then would cause me to go on into East Asian studies and also to study cross-cultural communication. This opened the door for me to attend Stanford School of Education, but I didn't spend much time at the Stanford School of Education. I had so many transfer credits so I spent much of my time at Jasper Ridge at the Stanford Biological Preserve, which only allowed a handful of people per day, and everyone had to sign agreements that they would only step on rocks, not take anything home, but it was absolutely exquisite to watch the natural landscape and the floral and fauna that grow on the Stanford Biological Reserve. Next, I went to Crossroads School in Santa Monica, where I was a faculty member, and here is my mentor, Arlene Weinstock. She really got a hold of me when I was 22 years old or 23 years old, taught me how to teach practically, and it was fun to have Arlene come to the opening. Crossroads School is a wonderful place for open-minded, liberal education, and I certainly enjoyed all 6 years there and became the academic dean of the middle school. Renee Tajima Pena, who will be with us on November 17th at JANM, is a legendary filmmaker, and this is the relocation camp piece. I will probably go into more detail about it, but on the outside here, I have the last names of the families who are related to us, my family and my husband's family, on the outside of the bamboo barbed wire fence, and Renee came to see her family's names as well. Later on, this is really where I start to figure things out. From 1986 to the present, I finally figure out that maybe I have to that I better retrain into ceramics. And so at Otis College of Art and Design, and I like to think that at the age of 30, I kept saying to myself, the late bloomers eventually take over the garden. And here we are in the 1989 class of 89, 90, and here's Ralph Becerra, our teacher. Many of almost all of these students are continuing their careers in clay, and here they are, the LA group at the Craft in America opening last month. Ralph Becerra taught us how to make brushes. So here are a copy of some of his brushes that I inherited after he passed away. And I guess what distinguishes these brushes is that he made them using my hair. He just came by one day, clipped it, and said, "This is perfect for making a brush." I like to also, one of the great things about Otis is that it was my students who helped Emily and everyone at Craft in America to install this show. And it is no easy task to install ceramics. So I'm I was very, very honored that these students former students of mine stepped up for the installation. So here is an example of something I did while I was a Becerra student, and this is in the Sunny and Gloria Cam collection. This goes back to 1990, and then 6 years later, you can see that I worked on it, refined this particular series, Mad Hatter tea set. By the way, I always thought of this as the Ogawa O. I also love to look at Gustav Klimt's use of gold, Fabergé eggs, but also the tension in nature between forms. To make cacti from Saturn, Ralph Becerra gave us a covered jar container assignment. Actually, I was supposed to make a casserole dish, and so this was the beginning of my casserole series. Another casserole dish, Japanese-inspired patterns of chrysanthemums. Also, it was inspired by Louis Comfort Tiffany's ceramic work as well. Japanese-inspired cranes, again, it's this idea of tessellating forms so that here you have a crane, so a stylized crane, but also the negative space or the positive space. It's hard to determine, but to tessellate forms together. Working with texture, I used ketchup bottles to apply the slip here to make sea urchin tea set. And this will be the beginning of my interests that continue on environmental and ecological concerns. So here, as early as 1992, I was starting to see problems in the Hawaiian coral reefs. So therefore, oops, what happened here? So therefore, I made this centerpiece, which is to serve sushi, but the water is black, and it was just to symbolize that even though the coral was looking like this green pale color, I was seeing some black spots, and I thought it was weird because I used to go to the same coral reef all the time. Just about whenever we had a holiday, we were there looking at things, and I thought, gosh, things are looking a little strange. And then I made these bento boxes. So, and this is our former dining room table. So I would serve sushi, I would serve fish or chicken. I would have some sort of dish here, dipping sauce, and these all break apart into a service of 6. So this was my dinnerware project. I had a tea party at my house, and Lois Boardman actually was attending, and we were cleaning up afterwards, and we were stacking all these dishes in the sink, and I started thinking about the role of women in the kitchen, feminism, and our role. And these are life-size teapots and cups. And what really I think was the breakthrough is as I was stacking these dishes in the sink, I was able to say, oh, I could stabilize these by putting saucers in between. And then I run a plumb line all the way down so that I can make sure everything is lined up. I can even get a little gesture here by creating extra sets here. And for those who ask, this is real gold. Ralph Becerra taught us how to melt gold on clay. America's Crude Awakening was a turning point where I start really getting overtly with my commentary and not quite so subtle as the previous work. It was 9/11 becomes a big turning point where I start looking at some of our problems. I start looking at sushi as the new fast food in America. Here you see I am stacking up cars one on top of another, and we are spilling out more cars, and we have ourselves the beginning of environmental concerns of overfishing, that I have insects, I have airplanes, I have the causes for global warming. We have an economic disaster. So during the dot-com bust, I did tulipomania, which was tulips inside our tulips with obsolete ticker symbols. Enron, I can't even, CMGI, Xilinx, Broadvision, Yahoo, of course, is almost out of business. And here is a covered container that is in the form of a cake where it's bulls make money, bears make money, and pigs get slaughtered. At the same time, I'm making a commentary about Japanese Americans. 9/11 will then caused me to worry a lot about the relocation of Muslim Americans. So I write here, President Ford's promise to the United States and to Japanese American. It's called the American Promise, that with his proclamation, it doesn't become a law, but it is his proclamation that American history has a great stain on our history and the betrayal of American citizens, Japanese Americans. So here we have bamboo, here, barbed wire, a sarcophagus of sorts. Inside are my grandfather, Shichitaro Takayama's ID tags. And on the outside, I have the last names of family members who were relocated, which come out to 37 families, including their children. So it's a large number of people from Pasadena, actually everyone we knew, relocated. Tea bags was triggered by the Sex and the City television show, where I start telling the stories of various women. This is Rosemary's tea bag, this is the Sex and the City tea bag, and this is the Japanese American tea bag. And it is using this idea of opulence, of but also of beauty. The handbag becomes very collectible. It becomes, it elevates rather from function maybe to more style and decorative. It talks a little bit about perhaps overindulging and yet also about beauty and femininity. This is my imaginary tea bag of Noah's wife's tea bag when she entered the ark that she probably carried with her seeds so that she could, so after the flood, flowers uh, and botanicals could be replanted on Earth. Again, tea bags is loaded with commentary on gender roles, domesticity, feminism, and the burdens that many women face today. Here I've lost it. And I always say I read Malcolm Gladwell's book Tipping Point. I also taught Malcolm Gladwell's Tipping Point in English classes at Otis, where I taught English for 25 years. And so I made this while I was teaching Tipping Point. And here's the first, where I'm making tipping point cups, and we are really tipping the scale on fossil fuels. And the SUV becomes extremely popular with the catalytic converter that allowed for better fuel consumption. And here we are tipping over on our reliance of fossil fuels. This is during the miso deflated happens during the subprime lending, where so many people became victims, and I do consider them victims of subprime lending practices, and the targeting of lower income families, that you could get into a house with no down payment and not understanding that when these mortgages reset, that you would not be able to afford the payments. And of course, we all recall the massive foreclosures throughout the United States, and really creating an Armageddon of condition of the almost collapse of the American economy. This is California's role, which is all about greed and preying on lower income families. And here is the state of California with its Gold Coast. And again, sushi is coming in here, using the sushi to create a metaphor. And here are sinking banks during the subprime. This one is called TARP, the TARP program that was supposed to TARP and protect our economy, which perhaps it saved. Meanwhile, perhaps it did save our economy. We continue to pump for fossil fuels. Here are all the different houses that are foreclosing and tipping over. This was the first foray into using trompe l'oeil, using food as a metaphor for decadence, insect-infested American excess, and political corruption. Here is a beautiful table by Mira Nakashima, a gorgeous table with desserts. And I call them just desserts. Washington, as usual, is on the Mira Nakashima's beautiful table. And here is a life-size cake with slimy characters walking around us, leaving their trails in Washington, D.C. Here is Trump-inspired work titled "Let Them Eat Trump." This white cake is symbolizing the White House. Here we have a chocolate eclair called Trump Trash with the snail pooping dollar bills. Asian persuasion kitsch. Asian design becomes very, very popular. And so I did stereotypes of Asian designs. And of course, I have to put the bugs and the insects here. This is actually a teapot with this caterpillar, its spout. And here's the lid here. This was the first of the Made in Pasadena cake series, where one beautiful cake is fine, but if you have a fly on there, it ruins your meal. Okay, it's very clear that the Kauai coral reef is under distress, and in Kauai, the beautiful coral is turning black, and it is being linked to the overuse of suntan lotion or the contamination from suntan lotion. So some of the main ingredients in suntan lotion have changed, and hopefully the reef will come back. But I think the damage is done as the need to to bring back our coral reef is important because coral reefs are the canary in the coal mine. It is the warning that we are suffering from global warming. And of course, we know the consequences with many fires and floods. And we have multiple incidents throughout the year now. And particularly last summer, it just seems to be increasing. Not seems, it is increasing regularly. Here is coral reef chandelier, and this is a bleached coral reef, which chunks of coral reef were starting to arrive on the shores of Guam as early as 2012, I believe. One of my students, Valerie Wu, came in with a pocket full of chunks of bleached coral, and I said, "What is this?" And she said, "We're not sure, but we think it's coral." And it's solidified and petrified. And I said, "Oh my goodness." So I carried these for quite some time and then eventually made an entire series about it. During the pandemic, I had the opportunity to spend time working on other kinds of work. And so that gave me the idea of honoring the Native American crafts. And in particular, I was interested in the mimbre. Here is a fairly large vessel, about 13 inches in diameter. And here would be where you would serve sushi. And here I would place the wasabi. But it gave me an opportunity to develop the use of black and white, which I had never worked in. So during the pandemic, I did a series of cupcakes, what started off as Hope for a Cure cupcake. And it was an innocuous way of just fiddling around with making cupcakes. These are lidded containers. And then I saw previously at the doctor's office, I saw syringes that the nurses used that were pens. So I made this a functional pen holder in the form of a syringe. And these lids come off for small little containers. Then I thought, well, this is a pretty good idea. So I started to create a chronology of the pandemic as it continues today. But this one was called the White House Pandemic Response Team, a turtle and a snail. They're extremely confused and extremely slow. Here's stimulus package where Americans receive stimulus money and a little bit of stimulus money to keep them afloat inside pandemic. Hope for a Cure cupcake stimulus package. Hope for a Cure cupcake, another health dedicated to healthcare professionals. And this one is called Hope for a Cure Cupcake, America's Great Reopening. This was our first reopening. The American flag is clearly upside down. We took the masks off too soon. We reopened probably without enough caution. And Florida accidentally broke off while I was making it. And I thought, well, this is perfect. We ought to just let them break off completely. And maybe I would like to propose that we send busloads of banned books to Florida schools. The Altadena Pasadena fire in 1993 was devastating to our neighborhood, and here is my neighborhood in 1993. John McPhee writes as much earlier in the 1970s that nature's invoice is going to be high, and how can we, and he uses my neighborhood as part of an example of living against the mountains in Los Angeles, and he says, how can we defy nature and expect to win? So this is from 1993, our fire. Of course, there will be many more fires. The fire just went straight by our house, and here are some of the helicopters that saved our home and our neighborhood. But again, we continue to have these fires, and so I am working on a piece called California Wildfires. During shutdown, Crafted America asked me to do some pieces, to move some pieces into their windows. These are some totems, coral reef totems, and these are named after various coral reefs that are now under distress and dying. We use solar lights, so you can see the solar panels, and you can see the dark, the Crafted America was shut down during the shutdown, and these are LED lights that would light up at night. also during shutdown, Crafted America arranged for many of us to show in the LAX Southwest Terminal, and here is the three-tiered chandelier. I just finished this piece, and it probably could use a little bit of explanation. I was looking at atolls, found this mirror on the curb during the shutdown, and thought, I got to make something. So I built atolls, are bodies of water. There's about 440 of them, mostly in the Pacific Ocean, bodies of water that are surrounded by coral reefs. But in this case, the coral reefs are dying, and they're bleached coral, so they break apart, land on different beaches such as Guam. And here, wherever I have white icons, these are the causes for global warming. Our cities, our beef, the way we do agriculture, air travel. And we're very slow. And here we have coral reefs affected by our overdependence on fossil fuels, and the consequences on this coral atoll is flooding. And this summer I came up with these, again, flooding, but and here are homes that are being destroyed all over the world. So wherever you see blue and white are the consequences of global warming, and in white are the causes. In 2006, our family, my husband and I, Stephen, removed the front yard lawn and started growing organic produce in the front yard. My husband is a retired organic produce broker, and here we're growing food for the neighborhood. And in the backyard, we do the same thing, growing food for us. But what it did is it kind of activated our whole front yard. So our neighbors would come in and pick whatever they wanted, salads or whatever. So I tried to create a situation where families in our neighborhood could pick herbs as well as put together a salad. And it activated our front yard while the two of us were at work. And over here is a gate where our Labrador Retriever would welcome visitors. So I put a covered container with dog biscuits, and people could feed the dog. And the consequence was the dog got fat. And the city, another consequence of doing this is I was breaking a code, and I knew I was violating a code, as I was a design commissioner at the time of Pasadena, and I knew I was breaking a code by removing the lawn. And so I was cited, and I went down to City Hall and started talking about what a ridiculous code that is, and that I purposely created using DG, which I learned from as a design commissioner, that DG could be placed in our parks without the weeds coming up, and we could create beautiful pathways in our parks. So I just tried it in my front yard. So the city did take away that $500 fine, and today the city will give you $500 for taking out your lawn. I'm pretty proud of this. I made this summer. I went to Brian Vancell of the CEO, the new CEO and owner of Laguna Clay, and I said, Brian, I would like to use your family's sewer pipe clay, and I would like to use sewer pipe clay to create vessels where I can compost directly in the vessel. So here would be garden scraps, kitchen scraps placed in each vessel, and I would allow them to decompose. And a season later, I would be able to add, I thought, tomatoes. So we couldn't do it in the Crafted America windows because they get too warm, about 100 degrees. It's a little too hot to grow tomatoes. So one of my students, Justin Akioka, arranged to put plants that could tolerate the heat. But what I do at home is I compost directly in the sewer pipe clay. And then, the reason I use sewer pipe clay is that when the water does not penetrate the walls of the vessel. In other words, there's no evaporation except for the top. So I created very, very deep vessels for tomatoes to grow that long taproot. And then I tried to keep this down to a minimum so that only evaporation will be coming out of the top, but will not be vacating from the sides. This is for herbs herbs. And a tree fell over, so I chopped the tree trunk and I use these as stands. I'm kind of proud of this. And as a result, though, now Mission Clay is being now widely distributed, or not that widely distributed because they just started it, but they are selling it at Laguna Clay. And so thank you, everybody, and thank you for visiting. And I'm open for questions. And I have a puppy who is barking in the background. I'm so sorry.
No problem. We actually can't hear it.
Good.
My gosh, Joan, thank you so much for encapsulating all of that work into that. You're the consummate teacher. Your work teaches all of us. It just pervades everything that you do. So thank you for this. I just wanted to mention, as far as the title of this exhibition, that we felt that you are the beacon in terms of the issues that you shed light on in your work, and the way that you have this prophetic understanding of issues that then come to shape our world so much. And that you have really driven the ceramics program at Otis into its renaissance, and taught so many students the importance of working with ceramics. And so we admire you so much on so many levels.
Thank you. I had to look up the word beacon because I didn't know what it meant. So immediately when Emily talked about beacon, I really didn't understand what it meant. But I think if I can say, I like to cast some sort of light on ideas, and oftentimes I'm way too early on my ideas. Taking out the front lawn in 2006. And I should also mention that in 2006, I decided to no longer buy brand new clothing, which put my mother almost in full cardiac arrest because she thought I would be running around for the rest of my life partially clad. But what I think has happened is I would only buy pre-owned clothes, and now many of my friends have become my personal shoppers. And even at the opening, one of my friends brought me 3 outfits that she no longer wore. So I have a lot of friends who bring me clothes. If Joe Loria is out there, Joe Loria has been very generous in providing clothes.
You definitely live your word. Your words are very much put into action. I think that's very evident from the garden and from all of what you're presenting today. I have a question, as far as, and I invite you all to type those into the chat or the Q&A, or raise your hand, of course, to join us. Scale, how you've used scale in your work to convey some of these issues over time.
Scale is pretty much determined by the size of my kilns and by UPS and Federal Express limits. So that's why I often work in multiples that link together like a puzzle, and then it usually is dictated by the kiln. I do have a natural sense of scale. I think that will happen. I can only throw, 10 to 15 pounds of clay at any given time, but I can also join them all together, I guess. But there is a certain physical limitation. I don't like pieces to weigh more than 25 pounds, just because I have to load and unload the kiln, and many of these pieces require multiple firings, especially the early work. Sometimes I would fire 11 to 12 times. So in and out of the kiln is hard work. And as I get older, I'm very, very, okay, I can stop sharing. Somebody told me to stop sharing. Yeah. I'm able to, I'm able to kind of problem solve as I get older to just preserve my back, my shoulders, my neck, rotator cuff issues. So there are physical limitations as one gets older. I am glad that I like to work with brushes and airbrushes so that I can have a ganglia of wire around me, but not necessarily a ton of clay in front of me.
Okay, so very practical and logistical obviously, but can we read into what you do with scale? They're usually very toy-like, miniature. You're distilling these issues into very small scale work. What does that mean?
Well,
Massive issues.
I think that much of my work is all about a little bit of humor, always, a little bit. People call it whimsy. I call it just being kind of, tongue in cheek oftentimes. It also allows me to be detail oriented, really to focus in on the details. Actually, it's all in the details. As you can see in the background here, I've got lipsticks and, pen, a Mont Blanc pen, my mom's Mont Blanc pen, that I casted in plaster, a comb. I'm using all the details that would be inside a purse, or maybe even inside a person's experiences. And I'm trying to create little tiny toys or iconography for people to look at the symbols of what I'm thinking about. But I do think that there's a natural sense of scale for me to be smaller in scale. Yeah. And you can see that even when I was younger, I was doing larger scale work, and yet recently the totems are actually quite big. The totems are actually quite big.
Yes, yeah, comparatively, right.
Yeah.
How about color? I know you originally thought maybe another medium would be for you, but color is a huge part of your work.
Yeah, I liked painting. I liked all my painting classes at Otis. When I arrived at Otis in 1986, I had no formal art training. So I went through the Otis Extension program. I was able to piece together my own curriculum to fill in the gaps. And probably the most instrumental course I took was color theory and design. And that was the mixing of color. And so all of these pieces that I work with, I've either formulated the glaze, because Ralph Becerra gave us I had 3 years of glaze chemistry with Ralph, 3 years of surface design with Ralph. And he always required us to make 6 of every project. And to learn to throw, we had to make 100 pots a week. So that means that's how you learn to throw. If you have to make 100 pots a week, you learn to throw off the hump. And those became glaze tests. So what I'm rambling about is the necessity of fundamental art and design skills and fundamental art, because what I do with all my colorants, I cross mix them. So in other words, even this red, I have cross mixed it with this green down here, because they are complementary colors on the color wheel. So I have mixed, even in the green, I have a little bit of red, and even with the purple here, I am mixing a little yellow to take the edge off of the purple. And then I put green in every single part of these colorants. Oh, puppy is barking. But at any rate, I am cross mixing very carefully. And now I use a lot of commercial glazes, but I still do that cross mixing. Puppy's barking.
We can't hear it. It's good.
Good.
So let's see, since this show, which took several years to come together, there are a slew of new topics that you've already started addressing. Where are you going next, and how quickly do you respond to something that you read or see or hear about?
It takes a long time, Emily. It has to percolate for a couple of years. I'm very late for the schoolhouse, obviously, the schoolhouse. And there are people like Keiko Fukuzawa who have done great work on AR-15s and had a wonderful show. And she has a show up we're in a show together over at American Museum of Ceramic Art. And she has those fantastic life-size AR-15. So I'm way behind on the AR-15 idea. But I'm concerned more and more about climate change. I'm very concerned about why we aren't accepting it. in very large numbers in the United States. I'm concerned about the politics of it all. I'm also very concerned about this pandemic, and it just continues, and 400 to 500 people die, Americans die a day, and yet we have maskless individuals all over this country, whereas we should be wearing masks indoors. So I might do something about masks and why that is such a stigma in the United States, whereas in Japan, wearing a mask is out of courtesy so that one does not infect others of any kind of virus you might be carrying, and to be careful and considerate of others. And that I find very strange. I did do a COVID cemetery cupcake, and on the tombstones are cause of death. So it's no vaccination, before vaccination, no gloves, no mask. And I'm curious about the bivalent vaccine and how that's doing. So I will probably continue to watch this very carefully. And I'm teaching a course called Avoiding Climate Disaster. And next year I'll be having a course called Living with Climate Disaster, and how we can integrate this and how we have to change just about everything we do. So I suspect there will be more about climate.
Excellent. So you manage to, it can be difficult for an artist to balance the teaching along with the work. And you have this incredible way of weaving the two together. Can you talk about how, your students inspire your work and how you make that happen?
Usually whatever's rolling around in my head, and I'm concerned about, I usually teach it. So if I'm worried about, if I read Tipping Point and then I assign Tipping Point, or I read Cradle to Cradle and then I assign Cradle to Cradle. If I'm interested, so basically the content is woven back and forth. And so the research that I put into my presentations, my lectures, my classroom exercises, I usually spend that time thinking and researching for my classes, but also I can implement it in ceramics. So it does, they work both. And I didn't do that intentionally. It just happens I'm teaching this, I'm interested in it, and then it comes out later on in clay. I am interested though in returning to making wall pieces. Ceramics can go indoors or outdoors. And I'm interested in outdoor ceramic paintings that can be, because it'll hold up under extreme weather conditions. We fire to 2,000 degrees, so we, the hot California sun will not affect any ceramic paintings that people can place outdoors in their yards. And I think that people are converting their backyards into rooms. And so I am interested in wall pieces right now for the outdoors. And I'm also interested in LED lighting and improving the LED lighting. Every year, better LED lighting is coming out. So I'd like to have solar LED lighting as well as battery storage of energy. And once we have battery storage, and I think it'll break open a lot of possibilities.
So moving more into functional potentially.
I think so. I teach over in product design, and I think it has a strong effect. And I think that the product design department at Otis is extremely strong. So, and the ideas coming out of product design is very interesting. So again, I'll probably be integrating that. I'm also really interested in the sculptural possibilities of sewer pipe clay. And we have 2,000 pounds stored at Otis right now of sewer pipe clay. And I see tremendous sculpture coming out, preliminary sculpture just in the first 6 weeks. And I think that I will start sculpting in it as well. And many people did not know that the pieces, my planters in the front windows are me. They expect the gold, they expect the glitz, they expect the color, but they don't expect brown.
Yeah.
Planters.
Right. Yeah. And I think, well, you briefly mentioned during your talk the shift to the bleached, to the shades of white. But
Oh,
yeah, also a big shift for you to go colorless. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, colorless maybe, but also I like the color too. I kind of miss the color. So I'm pretty excited about maybe playing with some color. I'm looking forward to 2023 to really just have some fun and explore and maintain my studio practice, which is the first 3 hours of every day I'm in the studio, even when I'm teaching. So I don't start until 12:30. And then my studio practice is when I'm not teaching, 12 to 14 hours of exploration. And every kiln has a test. So even at Otis, every kiln firing, I will slip in a tile to test a glaze or to test an idea.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I made the sushi. I began the sushi just fiddling around with the students' leftover clay and threw it in the kiln and to see if it would work.
Brilliant. Well, we're coming to a close here. I just want to thank again, yes, supporters of this exhibition, programming, the Pasadena Art Alliance, family members Nabuko Aoto, Jan and Lisa Takada, and John and Liz Kita, as well as LA County for their support of making this possible. We're so thrilled to get to put your work into our space and share it with the public. It's incredibly meaningful and enjoyable to see all of these issues depicted through your lens. So thank you. You inspire us all, teachers, admirers, as far as the art side and the whole spectrum. So thank you so much for this talk, and thank you to everybody who's joined us today. And this recording will be available in the future on our website.